Good. Good boy. In this video, I'm going to teach you a super easy method you can use to get your horse to lay down. And before we get started, make sure you like this video and subscribe to our channel for more weekly horse videos. So all you need to get started is just a halter and a lunge whip, and then just me personally, I like to have some treats so I can reward my horse. I know he's spoiled, so you can have those on hand too if you want. So there's a few different steps you're going to need to learn in order to get your horse to lay down. The first step is to teach your horse how to soften. So I've covered this in many other videos. I'm sure y'all are getting sick of hearing it, but it's beneficial. So I'll just review real quick how to teach your horse to soften. So when I say getting your horse to soften, that means I'm going to get them to lower their head, and ideally I want them to be able to lower their head to the ground. The way I teach this is I'm simply just going to apply pressure to the lead rope, pulling down towards the ground, and I'm just going to hold the pressure until the horse drops their nose, even if they just drop it like half an inch or something. So I'm going to apply the pressure, and he immediately drops his head, so I'll release the pressure. I'm going to apply the pressure and he drops his nose real good. Okay, let's see if he can do it to the ground. So I'm just going to apply the pressure all the way to his nose hits the ground like that. Perfect. When you go to teach this to your horse, before you even try to teach them to lay down, you want to make sure that they can do this really responsively and that they can do it with the lightest pressure. It'll just make it so much easier on you when it comes time to putting all the steps together and getting them to lay down. So another thing you want your horse to be able to do when softening is I want them to be able to lower their head, but then also keep it down for a few seconds. So let's see if he'll do that. I'll ask him to soften. And yeah, so he gradually brings his head back up. He knows I'm asking him to keep his head down there. Oh, he's got yawns this morning. He must be tired. And this will just come in handy because when you get your horse to lay down, you want them to be able to keep their head down for a longer period of time and not just immediately pull it out. So see here, he's just chilling. So keep in mind, if your horse has never done any of these steps I'm mentioning, it's gonna take a little bit longer to teach them to lay down because they first need to master these steps. But if these are just normal groundwork things you do with your horse, like I got Tucker to lay down in just under a month because he already knew this stuff, so I just put it all together and it took about a month. If you're more consistent, it may take less time than that, but if you're also teaching these things just now to your horse and they're not familiar with them, it may take a little longer. Stick at it, be consistent, and it'll pay off. So the next thing you want your horse to know before you teach him to lay down is how to pick up all 4 feet on command. So this will correlate to a few different points we're going to cover, but I just wanted to cover this exercise first because you're going to need to be able to do this before you move on. So to teach your horse to pick up their legs on command, I'm going to need my lunge whip here, and all I'm going to do is take my lunge whip and tap on their lower leg until they pick up their foot. So in the beginning, as soon as your horse shifts their weight or like picks up their foot in the slightest, you can stop and reward them, and that's how they're going to learn that that's the right thing to do. So I'll show y'all here, and Tucker's pretty much a pro at this, so he's going to respond right away. I'm going to tap on his lower leg and he picks up his foot. So as soon as he starts to pick up his foot, I'm going to release the tap and bring the crop away from him. So it's important that you can do this with all 4 of your horse's feet. So I'll just do the back feet now. I'm just going to tap on that lower leg and he picks up his foot right away. And all I'm doing is a light tap. In the beginning, your horse may not want to pick up their feet right away, so just keep a constant tap. And if they're not picking up, you can kind of increase the intensity of it until they pick up their foot or show signs that they're like shifting their weight. But right now, I can just do a very light tap on him and he'll pick up his feet. Good boy, you're so smart. So once you can get your horse to pick up all 4 feet on command, it's now time to teach them to step their hind legs under them, which I'll show you right now. Tucker. So when you go to teach your horse to move their hind legs forward, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my crop and I'm going to tap right under their belly in front of their hind leg. And the reason I do this is because if you watch horses in the wild and there's flies on them, they're kicking their legs up and they're stepping them forward at the flies. So I'm just going to tap right here and kind of mimic as if there was a fly right there to encourage them to move that leg forward. And in the beginning, all your horse has to do is take the slightest step or make the slightest try, and you're going to stop and reward them so they learn that that is what you want. So when you first go to teach this and you're moving the hind legs under the horse, don't worry about what the front legs are doing. We're going to worry about that next. So right now, all I want the horse to be able to do is to step their front legs forward when I ask them to. Alright, so I have my crop here and I'm just going to tap There, and see how he steps his leg forward? Good. He's so good at it, I don't even really have to tap him, just point my crop. There we go. Good, good. There, good boy. So maybe you can get your horse to pick up their leg, but they're having trouble understanding to move it forward. So one thing you can do is just apply like a forward motion to your horse's lead rope and asking them to step up towards you, and that may get them to step that hind leg under themselves more. And remember, if your horse isn't picking up their foot right away, just keep a consistent tapping so they understand that that's going to be the cue to do that. So as soon as you see them just shift a little bit, you can immediately release the pressure and stop tapping. Okay, so once your horse is really responsive to stepping their hind legs under them, the next thing you're going to want to work on is getting them to keep their front end still when you do this. So I want my horse to be able to keep their front end still and step their hind legs far enough under them so that their hind feet are right behind their front feet. So I'm going to show you how to do this right now. So I'm going to just align Tucker up with this pole, and this is just to keep him from moving his front feet forward. The pole will kind of help give him a boundary. And now what I'm going to do, since he's lined up with this pole, is I'm just going to ask him to step his hind legs under him. There he already goes. And just use this pole to kind of ward off any movement from his front feet. So let's see what he does. Good. So yeah, and you can just practice getting your horse to move their legs under them. And when they step over, I'm just going to back them up. And then ask again. Good boy. And see, he can be like a circus elephant. Can we go any further? Good boy. So it's important when you're teaching your horse these steps that you give them some kind of reward and release. These things are kind of complicated for the horse to think about and do physically, so you want to make sure you're constantly rewarding them and allowing them time to just relax. So what I do is I'll focus on asking them the cue for a few minutes and getting them to respond, but after that I'm just gonna let them take a breather and walk around and, you know, relax their mind and their body for a second. So I do this in increments. So I'll work on the groundwork and the tricks for about 5 minutes, and then I'll just let them take a breather for a few minutes. I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys what this looks like. So let's say I've been working on my trick and I'm getting him to step forward. And then once he's done that well for a few minutes, I'm just gonna let him walk and breathe for a second. So it's important to remember, if you're constantly doing this with your horse and not giving them a reward or not giving them a chance to relax, they're gonna get really frustrated. And if they're getting frustrated, you're probably gonna be getting frustrated. It's better just to take it easy with your horse, and they're gonna learn a lot faster if you do this, because they're gonna learn what's right and wrong. So when they do something right, you can let them just chill for a minute. They'll be able to correlate what's right and wrong a lot faster compared to if you're constantly pressuring them to perform and do something. So like I mentioned earlier, you're gonna start teaching your horse to move their hind legs just by tapping back here, but gradually you're gonna wanna teach them to step forward just by tapping under their stomach. So gradually you're just gonna start moving your crop down here and asking them. And that way it'll just make it easier. You're not gonna have to worry about going from side to side and tapping, but instead you're just gonna tap in one place, and it'll just be a smoother process when asking them to move their front legs forward. So now it's time to teach our final movement, which is getting your horse to pick their front leg up. So if you ever watch your horse in the wild, what they do is they step their hind legs under them, and then they bring their shoulders kind of down, and then they'll pop up one of their front legs to lay down. So we're mimicking the same thing, and right now we're gonna work on getting the horse to pop up that front knee. This is basically just one of our first points. We're gonna use the same cues to get them to pick up their legs as we have been using. So I'm just gonna tap his lower leg here, and he brings his leg up. So what I'm looking for specifically is when they go to lay down, they bring their leg up under themselves. They're not pawing out. If you have a horse that paws out, Tucker tends to paw and bring his leg out like that. What I'm gonna do, if your horse has the same issue, is I'll tap, and just to help them understand what I want in the beginning, I'll tap, and then I'll just hold it like that, and then I would reward him. And that's just gonna help them understand that you want the leg to come up rather than out. And then you can just work on like tapping it a little longer and having them suspend the leg in the air for a moment. Good boy. And so once again, this is a cue that you want to have down that your horse responds really well to, because when it comes to asking them to lay down, you know, they have to pick this leg up. You don't want them to just stand here and you're tapping, 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 waiting on them. Good boy. So now that we've gotten all the separate steps down, it's time to put these all together. And when we put all these parts together, this is when the horse is gonna start to figure out what you're asking. You're gonna be asking them to lay down. It's important that at this step, I'm not specifically looking for him to lay down. If he goes to lay down, that's great. I just want him to be able to put the steps together and combine them. So this is gonna be a little bit more major of a thought process for your horse. So it's important that you remember to reward them and give them that release and let them chill out for a minute once they've done what you've asked. So where I started when I started putting all the pieces together to teach him to lay down is I took him back to my pole, and all I did is ask him to step his hind legs under. Come on. And then I'd ask him to pop his knee. Good boy. Good boy. Pop. There we go. And then I'll have him walk off because he did a good job. Good boy. So the reason I brought him back to the pole is when you start combining these things, like moving the hind leg under and getting them to pop their leg, is that they're gonna feel pressured to step out of the compaction that you've created them in. And so having the pole here just helps them to remember that they are supposed to stay tight, like with their legs under them, and it can help you keep them from stepping out of that position. Just another tip is when you go to teach this stuff to your horse, I recommend teaching it all on one side and cueing on one side. I've always cued Tucker on this side over here. Today I've been showing you on this side, so he's actually done really good. But he knows it best when I cue from this other side that y'all can't see. So I'll get him to step under himself, step his leg up. Good boy. And walk off to give him a break. So now I'm gonna just get my horse to soften and incorporate these steps with that. So if you haven't done this part yet, getting your horse to soften and do these steps is where it's gonna get a little bit more complicated. When they're softened, they're gonna be more apt to step out of the movements. And so that's why I'm still in front of my pole. So I'll just start with getting him to take his head down, and then I'll ask him to pick up his front foot. Wrong foot. There. Good boy. And in the beginning, your horse is definitely gonna fight you. Like when you have their head down and you ask them to step this forward, they're probably gonna fight you and wanna pull their head up. So it's important just to maintain that pressure and don't require too much from them in the beginning, and don't have high expectations. So now I'm gonna get him to soften and then step his hind legs under him. So I'll ask him to soften. And see, he tried to pull his head up there. So I'll ask again. Good, and he kept his head down. Ask him to soften. Take a step, good boy. And then I'll just let him walk off here for a minute. So now that we've kind of fumbled about and putting our steps together, it's time to put all our steps together once you're comfortable. So make sure you have a nice soft place for your horse to lay down, because this is when they're gonna try and lay down. So I'm in this nice sanded arena, which is a great place for Tucker to lay down if he wants to. I'm gonna step away from my pole on the ground, because if he lays down, I don't want him to lay on a pole. So when you first go to put these steps together, don't expect that your horse is gonna lay down. So right now we're just working and focusing on getting them to combine all these things well before we really start expecting them to lay down. Okay, so to begin, I'm gonna just get him to soften. And look, he already knows to bring his back legs under him. And then I would just get him to pick that up. Good boy. So when he can combine all those things, that's great. So in the beginning, you know, you're gonna be tapping his belly to get his hind legs under him, and then you're gonna be tapping his front leg to get him to pick that up. And so it's just a process that you gotta work with. So step forward, and then I'll tap here. Good. And he stayed nice and softened, which is what I wanted. So where I'm positioning myself is right kind of at his shoulder. And so I can apply pressure to his head and ask him to soften, but then I still have good communication with him for his legs. And so if your horse is kind of scooting around, you can go with them and just stay at their shoulder like this, and they'll move around you. And that way, you're kind of in a safe spot, like he can't like walk into you or anything. So it's at this point that you may see your horse's knees start to buckle when they're like a circus elephant. And if that happens, like right there, he kind of went to go lay down, just let it happen. And if they lay down, that's great. Or if you see them start to go down, but then they don't, immediately stop and reward them so they learn that that is what you want. So this is the step where your horse should lay down when you start combining all your points. One thing that may happen is Tucker and I had been working on this step for about 2 weeks, and he can combine his points really well, but he just wasn't understanding really what I was asking him to do. So what I ended up doing is I just sprayed him off with a hose, and then I brought him out here to ask him to lay down. And when I did that, something finally clicked in his head, and he was like, oh, she's asking me to lay down. So when I went to cue him with all the steps, he figured it out and he eventually laid down. So if you've been working on this step for a few weeks, I would recommend that that's something you do, and that may help the process along. And it's just helping your horse piece together what they should be doing. So once I did that, he completely understood what he's supposed to do, and now it's a piece of cake for him. So now I'm gonna ask Tucker to lay down and show you guys what it looks like. So he actually just finally accomplished this trick last week, so we've just been practicing. It's not pretty yet. He still rolls when he gets on the ground, but I'm going to show you what it looks like so you can kind of grasp what it's going to look like when you go to do it. And so just remember to stay at their shoulder when they start moving. One thing that horses do when they do decide to lay down is they start kind of making a little circle. His feet will probably be moving like that, so I'm going to ask him to soften. I'm going to tap his belly. And I'm just going to keep asking. So there he starts moving. Come on. Good. Good boy. Good. Come on, you don't have to stand up. Good boy. So in the beginning, it's totally okay if they roll. It's totally okay if they immediately lay down and stand up. You just want them to understand that that is good. So I'm just going to reward him really good right now. And I have a treat for him because he's so smart. He can lay down. I'm just going to let him know that that's what I wanted from him. You can see his pancake that he made. So now that you've seen Tucker lay down, I do have a few more points I want to share with you guys that will help you in this process. But before I do, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, but also leave us a comment letting us know that you subscribed. So let me know that you're there, and I'd love to say hello to you. So now let's move into some other points I have about getting your horse to lay down. So the first mistake I want to cover when it comes to teaching your horse to lay down is to actually teach them to lay down by picking up their foot. As easy as this may seem, and you know, I'm always for easy, it's probably not the best thing to do because you're teaching your horse to lay down every time you pick up its foot. So if you go to clean out your horse's foot, or the farrier needs to check out your horse, you're gonna have a problem. So I was actually talking to my farrier, and they said that they had this problem with one horse and one client. So just something to be aware of. And you always want to teach your horse a trick like that with a cue, so that you have to cue them to actually do the trick. So they can't just randomly do it, like they have to be asked. So another mistake you can make when teaching your horse to lay down is just not being consistent with them. So like I said, this took me about a month to teach him, but that was me. I wasn't really that consistent. I missed a few days. So you could probably teach your horse to lay down a lot quicker than that. But the biggest important thing is just being consistent with your cues and taking time to work on this every day. Another mistake you can make is just expecting too much from your horse too soon. So this is a process. What you're teaching your horse is the principle and the process of laying down. So when you learn a process, you have to learn it step by step, and you're not going to know everything immediately. It's better to have a small expectation than a large expectation, and if your horse can meet the small expectation, that's great. It's important to remember that horses actually pick up on your emotions. So if you're starting to feel frustrated because your horse isn't doing something, they're gonna start getting frustrated. Even the smallest try from your horse is good and deserves a reward. So it's important to remember to end on a positive note every time you do this. You always want to end by rewarding your horse. So even if you've kind of had a hard session, always ask your horse to do something you know they can do, and then you can reward them and end your session. So always set a series of small goals that you want to accomplish, and then completing those small goals will help you complete the overall larger goal of getting your horse to lay down. So stay tuned, we have a lot more big things planned for the channel. I appreciate all of you who have subscribed. You can go hit us up on Instagram. It's Equine Helper, as always. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next week. don't have anything for you. I know you think I do. You did so good today laying down. You know that?